actually, this might be an apt time. Tell us some more about like what is WeConcile about, and how do people interact with it, and tell us some more about that.
All right. Well, it's now a mobile app designed to increase safety in communications between partners and couples.
Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I am your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Well, hello, Judy, and hello, viewers and listeners. We have another wonderful interview today. And Judy, tell folks the title of this episode.
Can your relationship be fixed with an app? An interview with Mike Bosworth.
And Mike is a really neat guy.
He is a neat guy. He was fun.
He was a lot of fun.
You'll see. Good insight.
Yeah, his background was not at all in therapy, but then his partner is a couples therapist, and they have come up with an app which you will see talked about on the podcast called WeConcile, which is a cute name.
Like reconcile, only a W instead of an R.
So stay tuned. You'll be hearing about that. Before we do that, we want to put in a word for now. First of all, a word for the podcast itself. And I have been touting for the past several episodes that our website is being worked on. And later this very day, we happen to be recording this on, October 14th of 2022. Later this very day, I'm having another meeting with our wonderful web developer. I'm going to give her a plug.
Okay.
Dina Rock is her name, of SOTE, that stands for Salt of the Earth. SOTE, I forgot what the rest of the company name is, but anyway, SOTE Designs, SOTE Designs.
Yeah, she's done a wonderful job.
She has done a wonderful job. She revamped brucechalmer.com, that's my website, and she is in the process, as we speak, of working on ctn7.com, which is our website, and those of you watching, you'll see it up above our heads in this episode. And so you can go there and find all of our previous episodes, and you can also, please, let other folks know about it. You'll be able, even more conveniently on the new website, you'll be able to send us suggestions, suggest yourself, suggest other guests, suggest questions, send us a listener letter. We'll remind you about that again after our interview where we have a listener letter. All of those things. So we want you to do that. And let's put in a word for the books, plural.
The books, yes. That's right. Well, the original book, Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
No, that's not the name of the book. that's the name of the podcast.
The original book, Reigniting the Spark, Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back. That's the one that spurred this podcast. But now there's a new one coming out called It's Not About Communication, Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy is Wrong.
And that book will be available pretty soon. I can't give you a date quite yet, but it is getting, it's, I think, within a couple of months.
Yeah.
So hoping maybe even by the end of this calendar year, maybe even it's a perfect Christmas gift for those of you who give Christmas gifts. I think it'll be available maybe for them. I don't know. I can't promise. Might be. Watch this site, watch our website for more information about that. There is a books tab on there as well. And you'll be able to get information about that.
Can they sign up to be notified?
Of course they can.
Oh,
of course.
Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, they can sign up to be notified. You'll be on our mailing list, and we will not spam you, but we will send you, announcements about, exciting new development. We'll send out something saying about the new website. We'll send out something saying when the book is ready. So please watch for that as well. So
before we get to that, I just want to say happy birthday to my sister-in-law, Julie.
Oh, isn't that nice? Happy birthday, Julie. So we're going to cut to the interview shortly. You'll hear Judy introducing, there's the word, introducing our guest, Mike Bosworth, and then we'll have our interview, and we will see you on the other side.
Our guest today is Mike Bosworth. Mike has a degree in business management and marketing and began his career in the information technology industry in 1972. For the past 13 years, Mike Bosworth has been the partner of Jennifer Lehr, MFT. Jennifer is the founder and author of WeConcile, a do-it-yourself relationship mobile app. WeConcile integrates couples therapy with the relational education people need to thrive in their meaningful relationships. WeConcile is designed to be an alternative or addition to marriage or couples counseling. Mike, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Thank you, Judy, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. And let's get started by
Okay.
how about if you tell us how you got into the work you do? Tell us about your journey.
My journey as a corporate professional, or my journey helping my wife with WeConcile?
I think especially the latter, although whatever you
Yeah,
think is
yeah.
relevant in the former as well. Sure.
Well, it's interesting. I've been a career sales trainer. I came out of early high technology division of Xerox that invented cloud computing, and I ended up having my own sales training business for 40 years, and I trained 15,000 IBM salespeople in the 90s. And one thing I noticed in all my training is that men really struggle with communicating their feelings and emotions. And I even heard somebody say once, now, maybe you know more than I do, but if you cut open a human being after they're dead, of course, and you separate the brain into the left and the right, the thing that hooks them together is the corpus callosum. And somebody said that women have a much bigger one than men, and so they're
25%. Yeah. 25%
they're more able
fiber
to
the corpus callosum. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they're more able to take the feelings on the right side and put language around them and communicate them. And one of the exercises we used to do with our alpha males in sales training was help them craft their own story, their who am I story. And then we'd have another person tend that story. And these alpha males would come out of those sessions in tears because they had never had the space or the safety to express their vulnerability. So many men are raised by macho men who say, don't be a baby and don't cry and don't be a girl and all that. So, so I've been helping men communicate and get vulnerable for years. And then Jennifer started the WeConcile project. I think she started writing it in 2010. And I got to edit all 3 versions, and we tested it on Microsoft Word documents first. Then we put it on a desktop app. And because we were bootstrapping it, by the time we got it up and running on a desktop, the world had told us that 85% of our market wants it right there.
Yep.
Yep. And so we did a redo, and right now we've been stuck in the Apple store for the last 5 weeks trying to get it approved. The Google Android store approved it. So, we're still fighting our way through this to bring it out.
Can I just interject that for those who are listening and not watching, that is the phone that you held up. So
I held up a mobile device. Yeah.
Yes.
And I have to tell you one thing that's kind of funny. I hope you can see this. But I looked at your logo on your website, and look at the homepage on WeConcile. See that heart?
Oh, how about that? We have some overlap there.
Wow.
Well, a little bit, only that number constantly changes because we have it's kind of a gaming system. And so users are rewarded for the effort they make in trying to work on their relationships. And so that score goes up. And so once people start posting on the community, their credibility will be tied to their heart score.
Oh, wow. Just again for people, because a lot of people listen to us and don't actually see the video.
Sure.
What Mike was holding up, it was a heart and it had a number in it. And actually, this might be an apt time, tell us some more about like, what is WeConcile about, and, how do people interact with it? And, tell us some more about that.
All right. Well, it's now a mobile app designed to increase safety in communications between partners and couples.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And what we found in working with our beta users is that in a lot of cases, especially men wanted to operate it on their own first before they turned on the partner communication, because men struggle so much more than women do at expressing vulnerability and articulating their feelings and actually putting a narrative around their reaction to things going back to childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually, and we haven't trademarked this yet, but we found that so many people wanted to kind of go on their own first before they attach to their partner in the app, that I call that WeConcile versus WeConcile, because a lot of people need a little WeConcile before they're ready. And we've also found that a lot of people, mostly men, are able to explore and improve their own ability to be in a relationship before they again turn on the partner communication. Because so many people, they make the same mistakes over and over again when choosing partners.
Mm-hmm.
They have what we call picker problems. And so
how does it work? Like, are there questions? Are there prompts? Are there activities? Like, what exactly is it?
Yes to all of the above, but the two primary buttons on the home screen are the I need help button when they're in an acute session, because Jennifer says you can't learn when you're all
In a
kerfuffle, in an emotional kerfuffle. It's really hard to learn. So the I need help button helps them calm down with a lot of prompts and thought helpers. The real beauty of WeConcile, especially again for men, is thought helpers, because it gives them menus of things. Oh, I did feel that, and I did feel that, where they couldn't come up with it on their own. So
I'm going to put in a bit parenthetically about that. It's always been interesting to me, as a man, I'm, cisgendered heterosexual male doing therapy with couples, most of whom are heterosexual. And it's fascinating to me how often women are surprised. And of course, I'm curious your comment on this as the expert on women in the conversation. Women are often surprised and sometimes astonished that men don't have language for how we feel ourselves. It's like, how can you not know how you feel and be able to hang a label on that? Women are often shocked at that, and often more than shocked, often annoyed. I don't know, Judy, what's your experience of that?
Well, I'm married to you, so you're somebody who's very in touch with your feelings. So it's hard for me to really say.
Yeah, although I had to learn that
That's
as
true.
a skill that I think most women learn it much earlier than most men do.
Yeah, well, I would say that's probably
well,
true.
a lot of men never learn it, but
Yeah.
And the whole family of origin thing. I grew up, I had a violent alcoholic father, and at the age of 25, my 20-year-old girlfriend, who was really hot at the time, gave me the marry me or lose me ultimatum, and I caved and I married her. And I read years later in Psychology Today that the number one reason males under 25 get married is to take that woman off the market so no other man can get near her.
That is one way to look at it.
That's a terrible reason to get married.
Yes, it is.
But again, I stayed with my first one for 26 years because I had 3 kids and I didn't want to not live with my kids. But when when it was college time, I had to pull a plug. And most of our friends and even my kids were shocked when we got the divorce, because I was able to maintain. But boy, my own resentment over the years just grew and grew and grew.
Yeah.
And Jennifer and I went to a couple's. Do you know Haiti and Yumi, the Jewish couple that were doing the couples workshops, communication workshops? We went about 10, 15 years ago.
No.
But the first exercise they did, and I found this really interesting, they said in most relationships, there's pursuers and withdrawers. And
Mhm.
she said, so in most relationships, you're either a hurricane or a turtle. And she says, you all know who you are. So we want all the turtles to go to this side of the room and all the hurricanes to go to this side of the room. And I'm a turtle. In my house, it wasn't safe to even, express anything. Well, 80% of the turtles were male and 80% of the hurricanes were female. So the females are trying to reach out and pursue and get these men to communicate, and these men don't know how to communicate, and so they become turtles.
Mhm.
So safe communication is probably the biggest thing that I take away from WeConcile, especially if you're a withdrawer.
Mm.
It gets both members of the couple to recognize their own style,
Mhm.
and to, the pursuers have to become more safe.
Well, and they have to not freak out themselves too, because a lot of times what the pursuers will do when the turtle turns into a turtle, the pursuers freak out because they're feeling like they're desperately wanting to resolve whatever the thing is that's happening. And of course, it just makes the turtles go further into their shell.
And that desperation, right? So that's why the I need help button helps people calm down first, and then you can go in and there's over 500 pieces of great content and a couple of hundred topics. And so once you calm down, each member can go in and explore their own topics. And then with the men, again, they have thought helpers, and then say, do you want to send a note to your partner? I'd like to talk about this. I just discovered that the reason I freaked out last week was because in my family of origin, and I'd like to talk about it. So it's really facilitating open, vulnerable communication with emotions and feelings and understanding. And once your partner understands your wound, you're a lot more apt to get empathy instead of acrimony.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah, that the technology there, we've done this on occasion, have texted each other in the same house, or back in the day before, like texting, emailing each other in the same, not because we couldn't talk, but because we had something to share with each other. But it's sort of funny, that sense of, people are so used to that technology, they can calm down with it. And then they have available right there in the app, they can send a message to their partner in that space of calm. It's sort of neat.
And again, with the thought helpers, one of them is, I'm too upset to talk right now, but I do want to talk about this. Give me another few hours, We're helping men put this together because they just don't know how to do it naturally. So many don't.
And let's just say it's not just men. There are women that don't either. So
believe me.
I don't think
I
we
was
want
married
to
to one the
only
first time.
bash men.
No, that is very true. Yeah. It is interesting. None of these things apply 100%.
No.
It's, and even the notion of pursuer distancer or pursuer withdrawer, it's a really useful idea, but it's not 100% true all the time for the same people.
There are male pursuers and female withdrawers. Absolutely.
Well, and even habitual pursuers occasionally withdraw, and habitual withdrawers occasionally pursue. So like any sort of classification scheme, you have to say, well, it's useful, but don't turn it into concrete, because
Well,
another interesting thing. Go ahead, Judy.
Well, I was going to say the nature of relationships has changed too. Changes every generation. So what might have worked once, like 50 years ago, doesn't necessarily work with today's couples. If you grew up in a house where there was a mother at home and the father went out to work, that's not the model that we're seeing most of the time today. We're seeing two couples that are both working, and that the expectations of who does what and childcare are very different. So so it's very good that what you have, because you have to learn a whole new set of skills on how to deal with the changing nature of relationships and the expectations.
I've always noted, or often noted, in the course of working with, over the years, I've been in private practice now for 28, 29 years, something like that. And over that period of time, I've noted how some of that has shifted. Some of the expectations have shifted, but attitudes haven't necessarily kept up with it. So
Right.
it's almost like the men of maybe our kids' generation or our grandkids' generation that, I mean, I'm 71, so, we're talking people in their 40s and people in their 20s, who are different from each other too.
Mhm.
But the men growing up don't really quite know how to impress women anymore. And the women growing up don't need men to impress them anymore in ways that
Right.
when I was, this is a very old fashioned way of saying
Yeah,
it, but
no, it's true. It's
men
true.
needed prospects to be able to
Right.
impress, for a high school
Sure.
boy to impress a high school girl.
Right.
Not true anymore. And so
Well-
it sort of left men not knowing what do we do,
And a downside of these devices is, especially we have found a lot of young men don't know how to talk to women because they're doing it all with texting. So it's actually decreasing their ability to converse, the
Yeah,
technology.
Yeah, I've noticed that when people will tell me, well, I said this and he said that and she said that. And then, we're 10 minutes into the conversation and then I realize, oh, you're talking about texting. You actually weren't in the same room talking to each other.
No.
They're using the same language.
Right.
But of course, then there's all these ways that they were utterly misunderstanding each other or inferring all kinds of things from, it took an extra 3 minutes for someone to respond to a text and that was a hostile act somehow,
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
amazing the how that does change the nature of interactions.
Mhm.
Another interesting thing that Jennifer has observed over the years is that opposites do attract, and she thinks that if you have in a couple one extrovert and one introvert, you've got higher odds of success
That's
than
us. Introvert,
two,
extrovert.
yeah, because two extroverts go like this and two introverts go like this. Yeah.
Yeah, that is, I see that a lot. And and again, with the caveat that, I definitely say I'm an introvert. I'm not only an introvert and you're not
And
only an
not only
extrovert.
No, yeah.
But there is, that phenomenon, it does seem to work well. We saw something in the materials that you sent and that I was just fascinated by, and maybe, you can tell me if I'm just sort of seizing on one phrase I just found fascinating. But what I saw was you talk about how human adaptability works against fulfilling relationships. And that sounds kind of counterintuitive. And I'm curious, that just sounds fascinating to me. What do you mean by that?
Well, for instance, I spent 13 months in Vietnam.
Mm.
And it was miserable, right? But I got up every day and made the best of it because I knew I was stuck there for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you adapt. And I think there's a huge number of couples that have adapted to mediocrity.
It's sort of settling, in other words.
Settling, yeah.
Yes.
And the thought of divorce is too frightening, but they settle. And I think those are the people who have affairs. I mean, people who are really connected and safe, they don't have affairs.
You're touching on one of my favorite topics because I differentiate between stability and intimacy, both of which are crucial. They're both needs.
Right.
But if you avoid intimacy because it's too scary in the interest of stability, that affairs are one of the ways that plays out. Yeah. That also fits with, we had a guest last time, and she was talking about compromise as not a great thing, that if you compromise, it's exactly what you're describing, that sense of just accepting mediocrity, adapting to mediocrity. And I mean, sure, that's fine if it works, but the trouble is it doesn't. At least it doesn't. If it's too general, it doesn't. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you have to sort of adapt to other people by kind of letting go of what you're worried about. But then there are some central needs that if you, like intimacy in general, if you let go of that, what results is usually, my metaphor for that is, it's like a seed that's trying to crack the sidewalk. The intimacy is the energy for growth. And somebody's going to try and crack the sidewalk if there's a pavement over that energy. And so that's often what happens. Affairs are a good example of that.
Intimacy is a seed for growth. I love that. Yeah.
I mean, it's stability. Stability is the roots that hold the organism in place so it doesn't blow over in the breezes. But intimacy is the energy for growth, and those are both needs. We need them both.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, people, what an affair is intimacy with no stability.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that ends
Yeah.
up not working.
Mhm.
But what if people settle for it or just privilege stability to the exclusion of intimacy, living organisms like couples won't tolerate that.
Yeah. Or they end up, because divorce is too scary, they just end up as roommates.
Yeah, yeah, and
Right.
I see lots of couples
Right.
where that's what
That's
they're
the stability part.
that's what they're presenting
Yeah.
with. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
This might be a good time to go to our listener question, do you think?
I think so.
Okay, well,
All right.
go for it.
Pull up the question. This comes from Sylvia today, and she writes, Dear Bruce and Judy, we're going to put Mike in on that. My husband Marty and I have been married for 15 years. We're both in our early 40s and have 3 school-age kids. We agree on the big stuff, but the past few years we seem to bicker a lot. Marty doesn't see a problem with that. He says when I irritate him, he says what he needs to say and gets it off his chest and then feels better. Well, I don't feel better. He says nasty things like calling me an idiot or a bitch. And even if he apologizes for it later, I can't forget about it. I've told him I'm unhappy with our relationship and want to go to marriage counseling. He says he doesn't want somebody telling us what to do and that I should be less sensitive. I love Marty and don't want to break up our family, but I don't want to keep going like this. What can I do to get him to work with me on making our marriage better?
Wow. Well, I would first try and help Marty see that resentment is the cancer of relationships. And her resentment is just building and building and building and building because she's not getting any validation or satisfaction. And he's kind of bullying her.
Mhm.
Right. And, it's interesting because when Jennifer was in private practice, 80% of her couples clients were female led. Men aren't out there saying, let's go to therapy. I mean,
Right.
even the men I know over the years who are in therapy, they won't tell their friends. It's shameful. I
Yeah.
think for a lot of men, asking for relational help is shameful.
Oh, yeah. And most of the men that I see initiating couples therapy, which is distinctly the minority, most of the time when it's men, it's because the woman in their life said, you better do it or it's over, or something
Right,
like that.
yeah,
They were doing it because the woman wanted to do it.
Yeah, which is why, if she could get her husband to, spend, when he wakes up at 3 a.m. to pick up his mobile device and explore his own stuff on WeConcile for a month. The nice thing about WeConcile is it can be MeConcile. And if you do wake up at 3 a.m, you can pick up your device and do a little exploring on your own. But I do think that somebody needs to help her husband understand the long-term effect of that resentment, because that's just going to get worse. And when it breaks, when that bubble breaks, it's pretty much over. Jennifer used to say, I don't know if you guys have seen the same thing, that so many times when a couple would finally come to her, it was really over by the time she saw them for the first time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's the Gottmans like to quote this one study, which actually for my previous book, I actually hunted down the study they were referring to. I finally found it. It took me a while of digging. Of course, you have the internet, which helps. And it was a study done back in the early 90s, and it's probably way out of date. It was somebody's master's thesis, I think. Anyway, what they said was the average number of years that people have been having problems before they try couples therapy, I forgot what the number was, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. It's like, yeah, people wait a long time. I do hear very frequently. So one of the questions I like to ask people is, one of the first questions I like to ask people is, why are you doing this now, as opposed to 6 months ago or 6 months from now? And very frequently I'll get people saying, we should, in hindsight, we should have done it years ago.
Right.
It's a real common thing. So indeed, there are lots of couples who come in, one member is pretty much got, 1 2/3 feet out the door, and the other one is hoping to save it. And, usually that doesn't work out so well.
Well, in my first marriage, before I ended it, we had a standing 10 a.m. appointment with a pretty good psychologist in Del Mar, California. And at least half the time, my ex would say, well, I don't want to go today. You go because you're the one that's unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what she hated about going to the therapist with me is in front of him, she had to let me finish a sentence. And one-on-one, she wouldn't. You know, she was such a
Yeah.
pit bull on everything. As Dr. Phil
That
used to
hurricane.
say, some people are right fighters, and it's more important for them to be right than to be in a relationship.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was just
And so
having that
finally,
conversation with a couple.
after 2 years, I said to Richard, our psychologist, I said, Richard, I can't do this anymore. And he says, Mike, I'm going to help you get out of this. But I'm telling you right now, you're going to have to be the bad guy because she's not going to own any of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was very
So,
painful. Yeah.
So Sylvia, remember that resentment is the cancer of a relationship. I
Well,
like that.
Yes, indeed. The thing is, she knows that, or she may
Yeah.
not know it in those terms. And often what it seems to me it takes for, the Marty in the story, the
Uh-huh.
husband, because he's basically, like I said, yeah, he's bullying her to some extent,
Yeah.
clearly bullying her, and also doesn't want to look at it. And often what it takes, what brings a couple like this to therapy is when she basically says, it's either that or we're done.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
when he perceives she really means it.
Yeah.
But it's
Well,
hard
it's
to get
true.
someone, yeah.
So if
For them, it's going to be a matter of time. It's going
Mm-hmm.
to be done if something at some point that cancer is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And if they don't intervene, it's going to be done. at
So
some
he
point.
probably doesn't see himself as the bully. He
No.
probably thinks I'm like a take charge guy. So what are some prompts or things that would be on WeConcile that might be able to help him see how his behavior is being detrimental to their relationship?
Well, another thing that Jennifer says that really makes sense to me is even if we were raised by Ozzie and Harriet, and I know, Bruce, you're old enough to know who Ozzie and Harriet are because
I
I'm
remember it well.
75. I'm 4
I've
years
seen the
older.
reruns.
Yeah. But even if you were raised by Ozzie and Harriet, everybody has emotional wounds.
Hmm.
And she says, when couples really start to struggle is when those wounds collide. And, the real difference between great couples and couples that aren't great are how do they resolve when those wounds collide?
Yeah.
And so what WeConcile does is help people understand their own wounds so they can articulate, put a narrative or a story about that wound and share that with their partner, when the heat's down, and end up getting empathy instead of acrimony. And once we understand the other's deep wounds and stories, boy, we're a lot more, what's the word? Accepting or
Empathetic, maybe.
empathetic. Yeah.
I can imagine it's interesting in this sort of scenario because the hurdle here, and Sylvia is recognizing this, the hurdle here is that Marty has no interest in doing therapy. And I would imagine initially he has no interest in using an app either. He's just thinking, hey, this is your problem. You get better.
Right.
But indeed, what I'm imagining is if she presented him, and ultimatums get a bad name,
Mhm.
but if she presented him with the essential ultimatum that said, look, I won't stand for this anymore. Either you're going to do something about this or, it's over. He might well be willing to say, well, I'll try that stupid app you're talking about. You know what I mean? He may be willing to try something like that way before he would be willing to sit with another, a third party.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a lot safer for a male who's resistant to, and it sounds like Marty's really, he's just not tuned in
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
her pain. He's just not, he has no empathy for her pain and her situation. So how do people learn empathy?
Yeah. Well, it is an interesting problem if he's particularly kind of from in the bullying side of things.
Uh-huh.
He has to know he's doing it, because I think you're absolutely right. If we, of course, we don't know these folks, but if we were talking to Marty and saying, if I said, well, gee, seems like you're bullying your wife, what do you think? He would probably respond very defensively. He wouldn't agree with that assertion. He doesn't think he's bullying her. He thinks she's too sensitive. And so
I'll bet you
yeah.
that Marty's family of origin, his father was exactly the same way.
Wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah, well, that was his role model, you know.
Yeah,
You know.
the problem is if your parents don't have a great relationship and you're a kid, that's your normal.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think that's why so many first marriages fail, because people don't really have a model of something that works. Harville Hendricks, you're familiar with
Yeah.
Getting the Love You Want. What I loved when I first read that book, he says, when people are choosing certainly their first partner, they're unconsciously trying to deal with their unfinished business with their parents.
Imago is his thing. Yeah.
Imago,
Imago relationship therapy. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, there's an element of that. Of course, I think a similar kind of phenomenon is it's not that we don't have good role models, it's that we assume the role models we have are good. And
Right.
and then
It's
and then
normal.
come to have different expectations, because that's another interesting phenomenon, certainly in our lifetimes,
Mhm.
that in the 70s, when divorce laws were liberalized, there was a huge pent-up demand. It's not like the old system was working well for people, it's that they didn't have much in the way of options.
Mhm.
Right.
And when the options developed, suddenly people were availing themselves of it. So all of a sudden, seemingly all of a sudden, people at least in American culture, sort of mainstream American culture, had available looking at their relationships and saying, I don't like this. Whereas their parents might not have perceived that option. It's like, no, divorce is not an option for all kinds of practical reasons, as well as sort of emotional reasons. It's like, no, we don't do that.
Right.
And so I've always thought of that as sort of an interesting, two-sided coin, that to be in a culture where divorce is virtually unacceptable, on the one hand, allows for abusive marriages to continue and the people being abused to suffer horribly. So I'm not advocating that. The flip side is interesting, though, because it means that people will find ways of doing okay that they wouldn't have if they had other options. So it's like you're talking about adaptability.
Yeah.
And there is something to adaptability that is nevertheless useful. Yeah, it could mean you'll settle for mediocrity. It could also mean you'll handle stuff that you can't change with more grace and actually be less unhappy about it. So, it's interesting.
Well, my painful family of origin is my mother was Irish Catholic, my grandmother was a staunch Irish Catholic. We were poor, but we all went to Catholic school because she paid for it. My grandmother paid for it. But for my mother, who was married to a violent alcoholic who never wanted kids, birth control was a sin, mortal sin. Divorce was unacceptable. No 1-800 hotline for my husband's beating up my kids. And she died of stress at 41. I was 18. And I was the oldest of 5, and like the youngest was 9. So, I mean, just trapped, no option at all.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad we're not there. I'm glad, it's just so interesting. I'm glad we have the options. I'm glad we live in a culture where divorce is available. And it's just interesting that also has I don't know whether to call it a downside. It has other consequences too. And it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, Queen Elizabeth eventually had to accept divorce as options for her kids, right?
Yes, she did. 3 out of 4. So that's
Ooh.
Yeah, who stayed married?
The youngest one.
Oh, is that right?
Edward.
Edward stayed married.
He's still married.
He's still married. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. To his first wife. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing this.
It's been my pleasure. Yeah. One other thing I will say about WeConcile is there are the culture that we've run into when we were testing it that loves the idea of WeConcile are Mormons, because Mormons are committed to marriage. I mean, divorce is really not on the table in that culture. And they get married young, and they really, don't have their pickers honed yet. And so for any couple or culture that's really committed to marriage, something like WeConcile, especially again for the men who are therapy avoidant,
Mhm.
it can be very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine that, yeah. And so your website is weconcile.com, I believe?
WeConcile.com. Yeah.
Yep. So for people who are just hearing this, that's like reconcile except with a W instead of an R.
With a W-E, WeConcile.
Yeah, WeConcile. And so weconcile.com will get you more information about that app.
Yeah.
And Mike, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure meeting both of you. Yeah.
It's been great. Thank
Right.
you.
Welcome back from that wonderful interview with Mike Bosworth. I hope you enjoyed that, and I know we certainly did. And I hope you found his WeConcile intriguing.
Yeah, you can check that out at their website. And we are here to yet again remind you, we would like you to tell everybody about our podcast. I'm not enough of a data analyst to know how come, but I mean, our listenership has been growing, since we started this, 2.5 years ago. The last few weeks, it's really been growing.
I know. It's
And-
like we're on fire.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but hey, keep it going, folks. Tell your friends.
Yeah, I
and-
guess people have been telling their friends. 'Cause
Absolutely.
We're spreading like a wildfire.
Yeah,
A
and-
good one.
A good one, yes. Yeah, for those of you out west, especially, that's where Mike was. He was out
Yes,
west. So
he
it's
was
like,
out
no,
west.
wildfires aren't always so good.
No, they're not. But this one is a good one.
This is a
so
good one.
Thank you.
And yeah, so do let folks know about it, and also interact with our social media posts. That's a great way of letting
And don't
folks know.
forget, they can still get the merch.
The merch. We haven't even mentioned our merch.
That's right.
That's
we haven't
right.
mentioned our merch in a while.
Our merch, and of course, the new website's going to make it even easier to acquire the merch.
Yes. we
These
have our
are
mugs and T-shirts
Yep.
that have our beautiful logo and have our, motto.
our inspiring message: be kind, don't panic, and have faith.
Right.
Those are the 7 words after which our podcast is named. So please do that. And also, let's put in another word for the books.
Right? Reigniting the Spark: Why Stable Relationships Lose Intimacy and How to Get It Back. Now available in paperback, in Kindle version, and in audiobook. And Bruce's new book that will be coming out soon. It's Not About Communication: Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy is Wrong.
And in fact, these very days, I have been doing the audiobook
Right?
recording.
Working on the audiobook.
So that will be available in all the various formats as well. It'll be available for ebooks. Actually, this one is going to be available not only for Kindle, it'll also be available for any e-reader, Nook, or whatever you want. And of course, paperback and also the audiobook. that
Right. And
I'm
if you
recording.
have any questions, like Sylvia who wrote us, you can go to our website, ctn7.com, and email us. And if you have suggestions about guests on our show, or if you would like to be a guest on our show, go to ctn7.com.
And you will be able to make suggestions very easily on the new website, coming soon to a device near you.
And until the new website, you can still use our old website.
You still-
it's
can
still,
still
it's
use it.
still working.
And I've been telling people, if you want to see a nice contrast, go right away. If you're seeing this soon enough after this recording, go right away to the old website, ctn7.com. Appreciate. That'll really help you appreciate the new one all the more. Let's just put it that way. And so until next time,
Remember, be kind
don't panic.
and have faith.